The cafeteria was full when the waitress, with a light touch to her belly, tried to maintain a smile, even while listening to cruel insults from an impatient customer. No one imagined that, seconds later, the manager would enter the scene, and his decision would change the course of that afternoon forever. Before continuing, if stories like this move you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because every week, fate serves up a new lesson here at Dark Karma Stories. It was late afternoon in a charming downtown coffee shop. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the soft sounds of conversation and laughter. The yellow lights created a cozy atmosphere, perfect for ending the day. Behind the counter, Larissa, a 26-year-old woman, adjusted her apron over her already slightly protruding belly. She was 5 months pregnant, and even though she was tired, she kept a smile on her face. The same smile she had learned to use as a shield against fatigue, pain, and sometimes people's lack of kindness. She had worked there for 2 years. She was well liked by her colleagues, dedicated and polite, but even that didn't protect her from the small cruelties of everyday life. That afternoon, however, held something different, a lesson that would change everything. A group of 3 men entered the coffee shop. One of them, wearing a dark suit and an expensive watch, walked with firm steps, talking loudly on his cell phone. His arrogant demeanor and impatient look were enough to change the atmosphere. He sat at the central table and called Larissa over with a snap of his fingers. "Waitress!" His voice cut through the air, catching everyone's attention. Larissa took a deep breath and approached, keeping her tone gentle. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to see the menu?" "No, I'll have a cappuccino, but quickly. I don't have all day, okay?" he said without taking his eyes off his phone. "Of course, sir," she replied, calmly writing it down. As he walked away, he heard him comment to his friends, "Impressive. Even when pregnant, they find jobs to drag themselves around." The others' laughter echoed like a knife. Larissa felt her face burn, but she kept her expression firm. She was used to looks and comments like that. But today, something in her was starting to tire of swallowing her pride. From the counter, Roger, the manager, watched the scene. A calm-spoken man with a serene demeanor, he was known for treating all his employees like family. He sensed Larissa's discomfort, but also knew that intervening at the wrong moment could make the situation worse. He preferred to wait. Minutes later, she returned to the table with the order. "Here's your cappuccino, sir." But as she placed the cup down, the customer gave the table a slight push, feigning distraction. The hot liquid splashed onto her hand. "Watch out," he complained, feigning indignation. "Are you going to burn me too? Is this how they treat customers here?" Larissa stepped back, embarrassed. The eyes turned again. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident." "Accident?" he said, laughing disdainfully. "Is this a service or a daycare?" Her friend's laughter returned. Larissa pressed her lips together, feeling her throat tighten. Tears threatened, but she swallowed them back. She took a deep breath and tried to stay strong. "I really apologize. I'll get another coffee. Try not to spill it this time," he retorted sarcastically. As she walked away, Rogério was already walking toward the table. The atmosphere had changed. The man's laughter contrasted with the awkward silence of the other diners. Larissa entered the counter, her hands trembling. A colleague tried to console her. "Don't worry about that, Laurie. Those kind of people think money buys respect." "I'm fine," he lied, discreetly wiping away a tear. But Rogério wasn't indifferent. He watched the man's mocking voice closely, the way he spoke with superiority, and something inside him stirred. He knew there were times when silence ceased to be wisdom and became cowardice. He turned to Larissa. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." The manager straightened, adjusted his jacket, and began walking toward the table. The customers noticed the change in atmosphere. The sound of cups and silverware clinked lower, as if the air awaited the next word. Larissa watched him, her heart racing. Rogério rarely got upset, but anyone who knew him knew. When he intervened, something important was about to happen. The man continued laughing, proud of his own behavior. "It looks like the manager is coming to apologize to me," he said, laughing to his friends. I hope he knows how to treat a real customer. But what he didn't know was that in a few seconds, he would be the one left speechless. Rogério stopped in front of the table, his hands clasped behind his back and his gaze fixed. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Is everything okay with the service?" The man smiled wryly. "Not exactly. That incompetent employee of yours almost burned me with her coffee. I think you need to rethink your hiring." The manager kept his tone calm, but his eyes said something else. The serenity of someone about to dispense justice. "I see, sir. So the problem is the service, right?" "Exactly. A pregnant woman here disrupting the flow, distracted. That's unprofessional." Silence fell over the coffee shop. The manager took a deep breath and replied, "Funny. I see just the opposite." The man raised his eyebrows in confusion. "What's up?" "What you call distraction, I call courage." The sentence hung in the air, and before the man could react, Rogério continued, "This waitress is pregnant, on her feet all day, supporting a child all by herself. And yet, she served you with a smile. So, I'm sorry, but incompetence isn't what I saw here today." The man's friends fell silent. The customer, red with rage, tried to react, but found no words. The entire room watched in absolute silence. Rogério bowed slightly. "And one more thing, sir. Here, respect is not on the menu. It's mandatory." The coffee shop fell silent. The sound of the clock ticking away seemed to be the only noise. Larissa, at the counter, felt tears finally fall. But this time, they were tears of relief. The man looked around, unsure where to put his shame. He stood up, threw a note on the table, and hurried out, under everyone's gaze. When the door closed, the hall burst into quiet applause. Rogério took a deep breath and returned to the counter, looking at Larissa. "Everything's fine now," he said with a slight smile. "And the coffee he ordered? You can keep it for us." She laughed through her tears, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't alone. Silence still hung in the air after the man left the coffee shop. Voices slowly returned, timidly, as if no one wanted to break the spell of the moment. It was rare to see someone react so firmly and calmly in the face of injustice, and even rarer was it to witness someone like Rogério put respect above the fear of losing a customer. Larissa, still trembling, watched from afar. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of relief and emotion. For so long she had swallowed words, accepted humiliation, and masked her pain behind a smile. But in that moment, something changed. She felt the weight of tears flowing, and with them, her wounded pride being washed away. Rogério walked up to the counter and leaned over. "Is everything okay, Larry?" he asked in a low voice. She tried to answer, but her voice broke. I didn't expect you to defend me like that." He smiled simply. "Sometimes, silence is what breeds cowardice, Larissa. Today, noise needed to be made." She nodded, excited. "Thank you, really. Don't thank me. You only received the respect you always deserved." Meanwhile, the customers resumed their conversations, but the mood was different. Some glanced discreetly at Larissa, no longer with pity, but with admiration. Others quietly praised the manager, commenting on how much more people like her were needed in the world. A lady who was near the table where the incident occurred approached and touched Larissa on the shoulder. "Daughter, you have so much strength, and that baby there," she said, smiling, pointing to her belly, "will be born proud of the mother she has." Larissa smiled with teary eyes. "Thank you, ma'am." Rogério watched the scene from afar, his expression calm, but his thoughts far away. He knew this kind of situation wasn't isolated. How many Larissas were out there, humiliated every day, in silence, just for working, pregnant, tired, trying to survive? He took a deep breath. The moment called for more than a simple gesture. It called for a decision. Later, when the movement died down, Rogério gathered the employees near the counter. "Guys, I want to talk to you for a minute." Everyone approached, curious. What happened today isn't news to anyone. We know the customer isn't always right. But what defines this place, and the kind of people we are, is how we react when someone tries to strip another human being of their dignity. His words came calmly but firmly, and each one seemed to find a place within the hearts of the employees. From today on, he continued, no one here will work in fear. If someone disrespects you, don't bow your head. Call me. Here, we defend those who do the right thing. A murmur of approval ran through the group. Larissa, in the back, discreetly wiped away a tear. And another thing, he added, I want us to start a new project. A space on the bulletin board, right at the entrance, with team photos and quotes about overcoming challenges. I want each of you to write down what the work means. One of the waiters raised his hand. To show to customers. To remind ourselves, Rogério replied, that serving isn't humiliating yourself. It's being proud of what you do. The silence that followed was beautiful. Some employees smiled. Discreetly, others lowered their heads, touched by the speech. Larissa approached slowly. Rogério, can I say something? Of course. I thought about giving up a few times. I thought no one really cared. But today, I saw that there are still people who believe in kindness. The manager placed a hand on her shoulder. And you are proof of that, Larry. Her colleagues began to clap lightly, spontaneously. Larissa was embarrassed, but her smile was genuine. For the first time in months, she felt valued, not just as an employee, but as a person. Later, when everyone returned to work, Rogério went to the window and looked out at the street. The sunset's reflection tinted the glass orange, and the city's hustle and bustle continued as if nothing had happened. But inside that coffee shop, something profound had changed. That small space, previously just a workspace, now carried a powerful message. Respect is the true spice that transforms any environment. Larissa watched the manager from a distance, her heart calm, a sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. She touched her belly and whispered softly, See, my love, there are still good people in the world. On the other side, Rogério straightened his jacket and muttered to himself, Sometimes fate needs a little injustice to remind the world of what is right. And that afternoon, between the smell of coffee and the evening light, the cafeteria good aroma, he gained more than a day's work. He gained a story that would be remembered, not for the humiliation, but for the courageous gesture that transformed shame into respect. Night fell over the city, and the coffee shop's activity began to die down. The last tables were cleared, the lights were slowly dimmed, and the sound of cups clanging against saucers created a calm rhythm that contrasted with the whirlwind of thoughts inside Larissa's head. Her heart still ached, even after everything. The scene of the customer humiliating her replayed in her mind like an uncomfortable echo. His face, his tone of voice, his mocking laugh. No matter how much the manager had spoken up, a part of her still felt hurt. Wounded pride is silent, and her silence weighed heavily. When he finished wiping down the last table, he went to the counter. Rogério was intently checking the cash register. Can I go, Rogério? He asked softly. He looked up. Of course, Larry, but is everything really okay? She hesitated for a moment before answering. Okay, just tired. But the tone of voice was not convincing. Rogério closed the drawer and rested his arms on the counter. You know, Larry, when we go through a situation like this, the body forgets quickly, but the heart doesn't. She looked away, holding back tears. Yeah, I think that's what hurts. I try to pretend I don't care, but inside, it feels like something broke. He nodded slowly. And you have every right to feel that way. It wasn't your fault. But there's something you need to understand. Silence also speaks. Volumes. Like this? When you don't react, the world thinks it's okay to hurt you. Sometimes, staying silent is like giving yourself permission to keep getting hurt. Larissa took a deep breath. I've been silent my whole life, Rogério. First with my father, then with my son's father. And now at work. I always thought that if I didn't answer, things would get better. And did they improve? She shook her head silently. Rogério moved a little closer. Respect begins when we learn to say, enough. Today, you saw it happening in front of you. But next time, I want it to come from you. She looked him in the eyes. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. He smiled. You already do it every day. You just haven't realized it yet. The sound of rain began to beat against the windows. Small drops ran down the glass, illuminated by the yellow light of the sign. The smell of coffee mixed with the damp air brought a strange peace. Rogério continued. You're one of the strongest people I know. You work while pregnant, you smile even when tired, you treat everyone politely. That's strength. But now it's time to use that strength for yourself. Larissa didn't respond immediately. She stared at the lights reflected in the puddle outside. That reflection seemed to show another side of her. Steadier, more confident, more in control. Sometimes I'm afraid, he confessed. Afraid of imposing myself, of seeming ungrateful, of losing my job. And that's exactly what they want you to feel, Larry, the manager replied. Fear. But respect doesn't come from fear. It comes from truth. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting a single tear fall. What do I do to stop feeling this? This mixture of anger and shame? You don't have to stop feeling. You just have to transform what you feel. Use this pain to remind yourself of your worth. The words echoed inside her with force. The rain outside increased, beating against the windows as if the whole world were crying together. Rogério stepped aside and grabbed 2 cups, pouring fresh coffee. Have a drink. The world can wait a few minutes. She accepted, and they both stood there in silence, watching the rain fall. The soft sound of the drops seemed to lull the moment. After a few minutes, Larissa took a deep breath. Rogério, try. Thank you for defending me, for listening to me, for believing that I deserve respect. You don't need to thank me, Larry. He smiled. Just promise me one thing. What? That will teach your son to never treat anyone the way that man treated you today. She smiled with teary eyes. I promise that. Rogério placed his hand on the counter and added, Okay then, it's already making a difference. The rain outside began to ease. The silence was now light, no longer heavy. The kind of silence that comes after the truth is spoken. Larissa grabbed her bag, straightened her apron, and took one last look at the manager. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Larry. And remember, the respect you seek has already started within you. She stepped outside, feeling the cool night air on her face. The streets glowed with reflected lights, and for the first time in a long time, the weight she carried seemed lighter. At that moment, Larissa understood that silence can hurt, but it can also heal when it comes with the certainty that one day the right voice will speak for you. And in that coffee shop, the missing voice had already been heard. The rain had stopped when Larissa arrived home. The small apartment smelled of soap and hope. It was simple, with antique furniture, but every corner held a piece of her story. The worn sofa where she read old books, the wall covered with family photos, and, in the center, a lovingly assembled crib, waiting for the baby who didn't even have a name yet. She dropped her bag, took off her apron, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection showed a tired but lively woman. The conversation with Rogério still echoed in her mind. Use this pain to remind yourself of your worth. She smiled slightly, placed her hand on her belly, and whispered, Mommy's okay, okay? The world still has good people. The cell phone vibrated on the table. A message from Rogério. Larry, a network auditor is coming tomorrow to evaluate the service. I want you to be in charge of reception. I trust you. She reread the message 3 times. Her heart raced. It was the first time the manager had put her in a prominent position. Even without saying it, it was a demonstration of trust, and also a chance. That night, she lay down without thinking about her problems. For the first time in months, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next morning, the sun streamed through the cracks in the window, bathing the room in golden light. Larissa woke to the sound of birds outside and a new energy. She put on her cleanest uniform, tied up her hair, and left early, even before her scheduled time. When he arrived at the cafeteria, Rogério was already there organizing the details. Good morning, boss, she said jokingly. He laughed. Good morning, future boss, perhaps. Her eyes widened. What? What's wrong? I can't dream big for others? He replied with a calm smile. Larissa laughed, but her heart beat differently. It was the first time someone had believed in her without asking for anything in return. The activity started early. Customers were streaming in. The smell of coffee wafted through. Conversations filled the air. Larissa moved between the tables with the ease of someone finally feeling proud of what she did. Her colleagues noticed the difference. Around 10 o'clock, the door opened, and a tall man in a gray suit entered, a serious expression on his face, holding a clipboard. It was the auditor. He looked around, taking in every detail. Larissa took a deep breath, approached, and greeted him with a gentle smile. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Good Aroma. Good morning. You are? Larissa. Employee. Great. He wrote something down. Who's the manager in charge? Rogério, sir. I'll call you. As she walked away, the man discreetly observed the movement of the place, noting every gesture, every detail. Larissa knew she needed to keep everything perfect. Not out of fear, but out of pride. The day went well. The auditor praised the cleanliness, the service, and even the presentation of the dishes. Rogério, attentive, let Larissa shine, observing her from afar. Her every gesture seemed to reaffirm his decision to trust her. But, near the end of the visit, something unexpected happened. One of the customers, a familiar-looking man, rushed in, bumping into a table. The cup tipped over, spilling coffee. Larissa quickly approached. How are you, sir? The man looked up, and in an instant, she recognized the face. It was the same client who had humiliated her days before. Her heart froze. For a second, all her progress seemed to collapse. Memories came back like a blow. His laughter, his cruel words, the shame in front of everyone. He recognized her too. He fell silent, surprised. The auditor watched from afar. Larissa took a deep breath. Everything inside her screamed for her to back down, but she remembered Rogério's words. Next time, I want it to come from you. She swallowed her fear and kept her tone calm. Can I help you with another coffee? The man cleared his throat, embarrassed. I'm sorry about the other day. I was an idiot. The hall fell silent. Even the auditor stopped writing. Larissa kept her gaze steady. You don't need to apologize to me. I just hope you never treat anyone like that again. He lowered his head, visibly embarrassed. I promise. Rogério, from the counter, watched everything with restrained pride. There was no need to say anything. Larissa had risen up on her own, with dignity and courage. The auditor approached, ending the visit. Congratulations, he said, looking at Rogério and then at Larissa. It's been a while since I've seen such a harmonious environment. It's rare. Thank you, sir, Rogério replied, smiling. But the credit goes to the entire team. The man wrote something down and said goodbye. When the door closed, the employees quietly applauded. Larissa, embarrassed, smiled. Rogério approached and said, See, I told you could do it. She replied with a sparkle in her eyes. It wasn't just me. It was all the time someone kept quiet. Roger nodded. And that's why your voice is worth so much. The day ended with a crowded cafeteria, a light-hearted atmosphere, and peaceful hearts. But for Larissa, that afternoon meant more than just a simple workday. It was living proof that respect, when defended, flourishes. And deep down, she knew that this unexpected news wasn't just the auditor's visit. It was the recognition of destiny. The sun was already beginning to set when the coffee shop's activity slowed. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft sound of voices and silverware. The atmosphere felt lighter. There was a sense of victory in the air. The audit day was over, and for everyone, it was a milestone. Larissa cleared the last tables with a full heart. Every gesture now seemed more meaningful, more filled with pride. She remembered every moment of the morning, the nervousness, the unexpected reunion with the client who had humiliated her, and the courage that had finally blossomed within her. The clock struck 6 in the evening when Rogério approached, holding 2 cups. A coffee to celebrate the day, he said, handing one of them. Larissa smiled, taking the cup carefully. Today was different. It was, he agreed, leaning against the counter. And you look different too. She laughed lightly. Have I really changed that much? More than you can imagine. Today I saw a woman who didn't hide behind fear. And that, Larry, is the kind of change the whole world notices. She looked thoughtfully at her coffee. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't defended me that day, Rogério. Seriously, you changed everything. He looked at her with a serene smile. I've done nothing more than any decent person should do. But maybe it's time you knew something about me. Larissa raised her eyebrows in surprise. Something about you? Yeah. He took a deep breath, looking out the window. I know what it's like to be humiliated at work, Larry. The silence between them grew thick. She waited for him to continue. Years ago, before I arrived. Here I worked at another coffee shop. I was a waiter like you. I worked hard, but my boss thought yelling was the best way to manage. I put up with everything quietly, until the day he made me wait a table while calling me useless in front of the customers. Larissa looked at him attentively, her heart tight. What did you do? I remained silent, but that silence destroyed me inside. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. That day, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to be a manager, no one would go through that again while I was around. She watched him silently, overcome with emotion. His tone wasn't angry, but rather remembrance. A memory that still hurt, even after so long. So that's why, she said slowly. That's why you reacted that day. Exactly. I saw you being treated the same way I was once treated, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. Larissa looked at her own cup and murmured, Fate has a strange way of bringing the right people together. Rogério smiled slightly. Maybe destiny just needs a good story to keep believing in humanity. They both laughed together. The sound was sincere, light, almost like a relief. And you? He asked. What have you learned from all this? Larissa thought for a moment before answering that sometimes silence is not cowardice. It is just the moment before courage is born. Roger nodded. That's beautiful. And true. The clock struck 6:30 when the last customers left. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the floor with golden reflections. It was as if the light itself celebrated the end of a cycle. Larissa approached the door and observed the reflection of the two in the glass, the calm manager and the waitress who had learned to stand up straight. You know, Rogério, I always thought that good people were those who avoided trouble. But today I understand that sometimes being good also means knowing how to say enough is enough. And you said it, he replied. And you did it with dignity. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on her stomach. I think my son will be born into a slightly better world. Go, because he will have a mother who does not remain silent in the face of injustice. The silence that followed wasn't one of awkwardness, but of peace. They both looked outside, seeing the busy street, the people rushing by, the faces passing by unnoticed. Rogério broke the silence. Do you know what I've learned in all these years, Larry? What? Respect is like the coffee we serve. It may seem simple, but it's what sustains the flavor of everything else. She smiled. And it has to be served hot. Always hot. He finished. The two laughed together as the clock ticked away to the end of another day. The doorbell rang as Rogério turned off the lights and locked the entrance. Outside, the sky was turning pink and orange. The city was still alive, but inside that coffee shop, something had changed forever. In that small space, among tables, cups, and tired hearts, two people had discovered the strength that comes from respect, and the truth that transforms silence into justice. 2 days had passed since the audit. The morning sun streamed through the coffee shop window. Good aroma reflecting on the polished tables. The movement was constant. Laughter, the clink of cups, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. The room felt more alive, more full of meaning. Larissa worked with a slight smile on her face. Every tray she carried, every table she cleaned, every customer she served, everything carried a new weight. The weight of pride, not humiliation. She had regained her self-respect, and with it, a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Rogério, as always, watched everything from the counter. Ever since that day, he'd noticed something different about her. There was confidence in her gestures, trust in her gaze. It was like seeing a seed finally blossom. The clock struck 10:30 in the morning when the door opened. The sound of the bell caught everyone's attention. A man entered, dressed simply but with a visibly nervous expression. As soon as she saw him, Larissa felt a shiver run through her body. It was him, the arrogant customer who had humiliated her. This time he seemed smaller. His shoulders slumped, his gaze timid, his pace measured. Gone was the tone of superiority. It was as if life in just a few days had given him the bitter taste of his own arrogance. He stopped near the counter, and silence fell over the room. Larissa watched him from afar, her heart racing. Rogério, sensing the mood, approached. "Good morning, sir. Is there anything you need?" The man cleared his throat. I came here to apologize." The words echoed like thunder in the silence. A few customers glanced discreetly. Larissa stood still, trying to process what she was hearing. "I was an idiot," he continued, his voice trembling. "That day I was angry at life, and I ended up taking it out on someone who wasn't to blame. I hurt someone who was just doing their job." Rogério crossed his arms, not interrupting. The man took a deep breath and then turned to Larissa. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to come here and look you in the eyes to tell you that I'm ashamed of what I did." Larissa fell silent. Past and present seemed to overlap. For a moment she saw herself being humiliated, the coffee spilling, the laughter echoing. But then she saw Rogério's face from that very day. Firm, calm, fair. She took a deep breath and took a step forward. "Sir, what happened hurt me, but it also taught me. I learned that respect begins when we understand the value of others. And I'm glad you understood that too." The man lowered his head, moved. "Thank you." Rogério placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know, sometimes fate makes us return to the place where we made a mistake. Not to relive the shame, but to fix what was broken." The man nodded, his eyes welling up. "I just wanted to say, thank you for the lesson. Life is generous when we decide to learn," the manager replied. "Would you like a coffee? On the house?" The man hesitated. "I don't deserve it. No one here is serving merit. They're serving a fresh start," Rogério said with a slight smile. Larissa prepared the coffee with her own hands. She did it calmly, carefully, and placed the cup in front of him. "Here it is." He looked at her, surprised. "You can still be kind after what I did? Kindness is what makes me different," she replied. "I don't want to be a reflection of what hurt me." The man held the glass, his eyes welling up. "I hope my son one day gets the chance to meet people like you." Larissa smiled, touching her belly. "I also hope mine meets better people than I ever did." The room fell silent, but it was a beautiful, light silence. There was something sacred about that moment. After a few minutes, the man stood up, left a folded note on the counter and said, "This is to help with something. For the baby. Please accept." Larissa looked at the money and shook her head. "What you can do for me, you've already done," she said with a smile. "You've learned to be a better person." The man stood still for a moment, then placed his hand on his chest and said goodbye. "Thank you, and God bless you." When the door closed, Larissa stood still, staring at the reflection of the light hitting the glass. Her heart beat calmly, serenely. Rogério approached, his gaze proud. "You handled it better than I would have." "I only did what I learned from you," she replied. "That respect is the only coffee that should never be served cold." He laughed, crossing his arms. "Then I guess I can say I learned from you too." The two looked at each other and smiled. At the back of the coffee shop, a lady who had been watching the whole thing stood up and commented to another customer, "It's beautiful to see when fate gets it right, isn't it?" "Yes," replied the other. "Sometimes he takes a while, but he serves the dish just right, at the right time." That morning ended in silence. But it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, the silence of a cycle closed with forgiveness. Larissa continued her day with a light heart. Every customer who walked in was greeted with the same smile, not the smile of someone hiding their pain, but the smile of someone who's made peace with the past. And as the scent of coffee wafted through the air, fate smiled, satisfied, because once again it had shown that no one is so small that they cannot change, nor so great that they do not need to learn. Time passed, and the days in the cafeteria, good aroma, they continued more calmly. After the incident with the client, the routine seemed different, lighter, more human. Each employee worked with a discreet gleam in their eyes, as if the environment had been purified by the power of forgiveness. Larissa remained the heart of the place. The customers adored her, her colleagues respected her, and Rogério, always discreet, watched with pride. It was clear how much she had matured. Her presence exuded calm, as if the very smell of coffee had learned to be sweeter from her. But fate, which is never content to end a story without one last surprise, still had something special in store for that chapter. It was a Friday morning when the mailman walked into the coffee shop with a brown envelope in his hands. "Give it to Miss Larissa." She wiped her hands on her apron and signed the receipt curiously. The envelope had no visible sender, just her name written in careful handwriting. Rogério approached, curious. "Whose is it?" "I don't know," she replied, frowning. "I don't recognize the handwriting." He sat at one of the tables and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and something else, a small paper box. Opening the letter, he began to read it silently, but the first few lines already took her breath away. "Dear Larissa, you may not remember me by name, but I will. Never forget what you taught me. I am the man who humiliated you here on that terrible day. Since then, I haven't spent a single moment without thinking about the shame I felt, not because of being confronted, but because I finally realized the kind of person I had become. I've lost a lot in life, Larissa, family, friendships, opportunities, but that day gave me something no amount of money could buy: awareness. I sold my car and decided to start over. I used part of the money to help a project, supporting single mothers. The rest is right there in this little box. With gratitude, Henry." Larissa put her hand to her mouth in surprise. She carefully opened the box and found inside a small pair of white crocheted baby shoes and a smaller envelope containing money. For a moment she was speechless. The entire room watched in silence. Rogério approached slowly, placing his hand on her shoulder. "What is it, Larry?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "It's a gift. From the one who hurt me the most." Rogério took the letter, read it silently, and nodded. It seems that fate decided to write the epilogue. She looked at the little shoes and smiled through her tears. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," the manager replied. "Just accept it. Sometimes the forgiveness we offer comes back in the form of a miracle." She clutched the little shoes to her chest, as if embracing her own destiny. The entire room, overcome with emotion, fell. Silent, a couple watching the scene discreetly wiped their eyes. After a few seconds, Larissa spoke, her voice breaking. "I thought forgiveness was to relieve the other person, but now I see that it is to free us." Roger smiled. "Exactly. And sometimes the gift that comes after forgiveness is the peace that pride could never buy." The clock struck noon, and the cafeteria was illuminated by a warm golden light streaming through the windows. Larissa walked over to the respect wall, the one Rogério had created weeks earlier, and pinned the letter there, right in the center, beneath the team photo. "This will be a keepsake," she said, "so we never forget that even mistakes can become seeds if we know how to plant them right." His colleagues approached, moved. Rogério looked at the scene and reflected on how much the place had changed. It was no longer just a coffee shop. It was a symbol. A space where dignity wasn't just served, it was cultivated. Larissa put the pair of shoes in her apron pocket touched her belly and whispered softly, "See, my love, the world still has a chance to be good." Outside, the wind rustled the leaves on the trees. The sun reflected off the windows, and fate, once again, seemed to smile. A few months had passed since the day Larissa received the letter and the gift. Life went on as it always does, but inside her, everything had changed. The pain that had previously resided in her chest gave way to a new, mature serenity. The coffee, good aroma, continued to blossom, increasingly full of stories and smiles. Larissa was already 8 months pregnant. Her body was tiring faster, but her heart seemed to have found rest. Every day she arrived early, set the tables, prepared the cakes, and greeted each customer with the same smile. Not the forced smile of before, but the one that comes from the soul, from someone who has learned to forgive themselves. Rogério insisted that she take leave, but she always responded with good humor. "If I stay home, I'll end up going crazy. I'd rather stay here, surrounded by the smell of coffee and good people." He just shook his head, laughing. "Okay, but I promise if the baby is born in here, I'll name him Espresso." She laughed. "Are you crazy, Rogério?" Their laughter echoed through the cafeteria, drawing loving glances from their colleagues. There was something different about the atmosphere, something unseen but felt. It was the kind of peace that arises when justice transforms into compassion. That morning, the coffee shop was busy. The smell of coffee wafted across the sidewalk, and the sound of conversation mingled with the soft beat of background music. Larissa served calmly, even as her belly grew heavier by the day. Suddenly, a sharp pain made her rest her hand on the counter. Rogério, who had been watching from afar, ran to her. "Larry, is everything okay?" She took a deep breath, trying to hide it. "I think it's time." Panic mixed with emotion gripped the place. Colleagues rushed to help. Customers made way, and Rogério, his heart racing, hurriedly hailed a taxi. As they led her to the car, Larissa looked back. The wall of respect was there, with all the photos, and right in the center, the letter from Henrique, the man who once hurt her and, unknowingly, helped her be reborn. She smiled through the pain and said softly, "Thank you for everything, Destiny. Now it's your turn." Hours later, a baby's cry echoed through the hospital corridors. It was a pure, simple sound, but it carried the power of a new beginning. Rogério arrived shortly after, bearing flowers and a look of emotion. Larissa lay exhausted but radiant. In her arms, a small bundle slept peacefully. "It's a boy," she said, smiling. "He's beautiful," Rogério replied, his eyes brimming with tears. "Do you know his name yet?" She looked at the baby and whispered tenderly, "Gabriel. Angel's name." Rogério nodded. "It makes sense. After all, I think he came to remind us that life still has hope." Larissa looked at the white ceiling and smiled. "You know what's funny?" he asked. "If that client hadn't humiliated me, none of this would have happened. Like this, I wouldn't have learned to defend myself. I wouldn't have earned your trust, and I might not have found the peace to welcome my son with a light heart. Sometimes the worst day of our lives is just the beginning of the best chapter." Rogério was silent for a moment, reflecting. Then he calmly replied, "Yeah, fate is good at that. It has a strange way of turning pain into a lesson." Larissa laughed, looking at the baby. "He taught me that respect isn't asked for, it's earned. That forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. And that even humiliation can be the soil where dignity flourishes." Rogério squeezed her hand lightly. "And you taught everyone here what it means to be strong while still being kind." The baby stirred, making a soft sound, and they both smiled. The moment was simple, but there was something sacred about it. A few days later, Larissa returned to Good Aroma with little Gabriel in her arms. Her classmates welcomed her with a celebration. The wall now had a new photo, Larissa with her son, smiling. Below it, Rogério had written a sentence in large letters: "Respect is the coffee of the soul, and those who serve with love never go empty-handed." She read the sentence and wept silently. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Time passed, and the Good Aroma became more than a coffee shop. It became a meeting place for stories. People who made mistakes, learned, and started over. Larissa became assistant manager, and little Gabriel grew up hearing stories about courage and empathy. One day, when he was already a boy, he asked, "Mommy, why is there an old letter on that wall?" Larissa replied with a serene smile, "Because it was there that I learned that life can be hard, but destiny always knows what it's doing." The boy smiled, holding her hand, and in that simple gesture, the cycle was completed. The coffee shop continued to serve coffee, but more than that, it served humanity. Because in the end, the stories that really matter aren't the ones about pain, but those that show that respect and love can still win, even at the smallest tables in the world.